The calm before the storm. The security feeds painted Richard Ponting's weathered face in an eerie blue glow as he reviewed the footage for the 100th time. His son's message had arrived 3 standard days ago, but the retired general hadn't slept since. Each viewing of the Borgen attack on New Horizon twisted the knife deeper, especially the moment when his grandson Jacob vanished in that searing flash of light. Richard's quarters on asteroid base HX-249 were spartanly furnished, reflecting decades of military discipline. The only personal touch was a hologram on his desk, a family portrait from happier times. John, his son, stood proud in mining gear, while a younger Jacob beamed at the camera, missing his front teeth. Richard hadn't seen them in person for 8 years, not since the incident that forced him into this self-imposed exile. Computer, enhance Sector 7, timestamp 14 hours 22 minutes and 31 seconds, he commanded, his voice steady despite the rage burning inside. The footage zoomed in on the Borgen drone that killed Jacob. Its design was unmistakable, a Mark IV hunter-killer, standard issue for Borgen planetary suppression operations. Richard had faced them before, during the campaigns he'd rather forget. A gentle chime interrupted his analysis. Incoming transmission from Earth Command, Priority Channel, the computer announced. Decline, Richard growled. He knew what they would say. The same political garbage about maintaining the fragile peace with the Borgen Empire, about how one colonial outpost wasn't worth risking an interstellar war. They'd probably traced John's message and wanted to ensure the infamous Iron Wolf stayed in his cage. Richard stood, his joints protesting after hours of inactivity. At 63, he wasn't the same soldier who'd led the charge at the Battle of Martian Gates, but age had only honed his strategic mind to a sharper edge. He walked to a seemingly blank wall and pressed his palm against it. A hidden panel slid open, revealing a room that officially didn't exist. The arsenal within would have given Earth Command a collective heart attack. Prototype weapons, experimental armor, and enough military-grade hardware to outfit a small army, all collected over decades of service and carefully smuggled away. Richard had always known this day would come, that somewhere in the galaxy, someone would cross a line that demanded response. He approached a dusty console in the corner and entered a complex sequence of commands. Across the asteroid belt, dormant communication relays activated, connecting him to a network of old soldiers, mercenaries, and others who owed their lives to the Iron Wolf. Authentication code, Iron Wolf Alpha 709, he spoke clearly. Operation status, active. Primary target, Borgen Empire. Motivation, personal. He paused, allowing the weight of his next words to settle in the empty room. They killed my grandson. Responses began flooding in immediately. His old network was still intact, still loyal. They remembered how he'd led them, how he'd bled with them, how he'd never abandoned his people even when Earth Command ordered retreats. A message from his most trusted lieutenant, Sarah Chen, caught his attention. The Phantom is ready. Full crew assembled within 48 hours. Just say the word, Wolf. The Phantom. His old command ship, officially destroyed during the Martian Wars but secretly retrofitted and hidden in a nebula near the outer rim. Chen had maintained it all these years, knowing this day might come. Richard began typing rapid-fire commands, accessing encrypted databases and classified intelligence reports. The Borgen Empire had grown complacent during the years of uneasy peace. They'd forgotten why humans had earned their respect in the first place, forgotten the fear that the name Iron Wolf once inspired. An alert flashed on his screen, movement in the Borgen fleet. They were mobilizing for another operation, possibly targeting another human colony. Their standard pattern was to strike 3 or 4 settlements in quick succession, demonstrating their superiority while staying just below the threshold that would force Earth Command to respond. Computer, analyze Borgen fleet trajectories and predict potential targets, Richard ordered, already forming plans within plans. The targeting of New Horizon hadn't been random. The colony's rich terranite deposits made it strategically valuable, but there was something else, something in the pattern that nagged at his tactical instincts. As the computer processed the data, Richard opened a secure channel to an old contact in Earth Command's Intelligence Division. The response was immediate. "I wondered when you'd call, Wolf. I've already prepared the files you'll need. But you should know, they're watching for any movement from your sector." "Let them watch," Richard replied. "By the time they realize what's happening, it'll be too late to stop it." He paused, considering his next words carefully. "What can you tell me about recent Borgen military developments?" "They've grown arrogant, Wolf. Their technology has advanced, but their tactics are stagnant. They still rely heavily on overwhelming force and terror. But there's something else, rumors of internal conflict within their hierarchy. The attack on New Horizon, it wasn't sanctioned by their full military council. Someone's making power moves." Richard's eyes narrowed. Political instability within the Borgen Empire could be exploited, but it also made them more dangerous, more unpredictable. He needed to understand the full picture before making his move. The computer completed its analysis, projecting a holographic map of likely Borgen targets. Richard studied the patterns, his military mind calculating possibilities. 3 colonies stood out as potential targets, each with strategic resources the Borgens might desire. But he wasn't interested in predicting their next attack. He was planning his own. "Chen," he commanded, opening the secure channel again. "Initiate Protocol Ghost. I want the Phantom ready for departure in 36 hours. And contact Marcus Wong, tell him I'm calling in his debt." Marcus Wong, the brilliant xenotechnologist who'd gone off-grid after the Martian Wars, had developed weapons specifically designed to combat Borgen technology. Earth Command had deemed them too aggressive, too likely to provoke a full-scale war. Richard had helped Marcus disappear with his research, knowing it might be needed someday. As his plans took shape, Richard's gaze returned to the family hologram. "I failed you both," he whispered to the smiling images of his son and grandson. "I thought staying away would keep you safe, would prevent my enemies from finding you. I was wrong. But I swear by everything I am, I will make this right." He turned to his weapon vault and began selecting his arsenal with methodical precision. Each piece had a purpose, each weapon a specific role in the symphony of destruction he was about to orchestrate. The Borgens had wanted to send a message with their attack on New Horizon. Now the Iron Wolf would send one of his own. The galaxy had forgotten what humanity was capable of when pushed too far. They'd forgotten the legends of the Iron Wolf, the general who'd never lost a campaign, whose strategies were still studied in military academies across known space. They were about to remember. As Richard prepared for war, a message flashed across his screen, a response from Marcus Wong: "The weapons are ready." And Wolf: "I've made improvements. They won't know what hit them." Richard allowed himself a grim smile. The pieces were falling into place. Soon, the Borgen Empire would learn the cost of their arrogance. They would learn what it meant to awaken a grandfather's rage. The Iron Wolf was hunting again, and this time, there would be no political constraints, no rules of engagement, no mercy. This was personal. "Computer, begin pre-launch sequences," he commanded. "And send a message to John, hold on, son. The Wolf is coming." The asteroid base hummed to life around him, systems awakening from their long dormancy. In the darkness of space, other hidden facilities were activating, other old soldiers were checking their weapons, other debts were being called in. The galaxy was about to change, all because the Borgens had killed the wrong child. They had no idea what they'd started, but they were about to find out. The Iron Wolf was going to war. Gathering the pack. The Phantom emerged from the Crimson Nebula like a ghost from ancient mythology, its stealth systems rendering it nearly invisible against the cosmic background. Sarah Chen stood on the bridge, watching as her crew brought the legendary vessel back to full power. The ship's black hull absorbed nearby light, its experimental metamaterials still functioning perfectly after years of hidden storage. Status report, she commanded, her cybernetic eye scanning multiple holographic displays simultaneously. The implant, a souvenir from the Martian Wars, processed battlefield data faster than any standard military hardware. All systems at 93% efficiency, Commander, her first officer reported. Considering the years of dormancy, that's better than we hoped for. Sarah nodded, remembering the day Richard had entrusted her with the ship's safekeeping. She'd spent 8 years maintaining the vessel in secret, knowing it would be needed again. The crew she'd assembled was hand-picked, veterans of the Martian Wars, specialist operators who'd gone off-grid, and a few younger recruits with unique skills Earth Command had deemed too dangerous to employ. Message from the Wolf, her communications officer announced. He's inbound from HX 249. ETA 3 hours. The news sent a ripple of anticipation through the bridge. Many of these hardened veterans had served under Richard Iron Wolf Ponting during humanity's darkest hours. They'd witnessed firsthand the tactical brilliance that had earned him his reputation. Sarah moved to the tactical station, where a complex holographic display showed Borgen fleet movements across known space. They're getting bolder, she muttered, noting the increased frequency of their raids. Computer, overlay historical attack patterns from the past 5 years. The display shifted, revealing a pattern that made her cybernetic eye whir with increased processing speed. They're not just raiding anymore. They're preparing for something bigger. Her tactical officer, a scarred veteran named Kazuki Tanaka, leaned in to study the display. These attacks, they're probing our response times, testing our defenses. Classic prelude to a major offensive. The question is why now? Sarah mused. Computer, access classified Earth Command Defense Protocols, authorization Chin Delta 9. The computer displayed a series of heavily redacted documents, but Sarah's cybernetic eye detected subtle patterns in the redaction algorithms. They know, she whispered. Earth Command knows the Borgans are preparing for war, but they're desperately trying to maintain the illusion of peace. A proximity alert interrupted her analysis. A sleek vessel was approaching, its design unlike anything in known space. The ship's hull seemed to bend light around it, making it appear as if it was phasing in and out of reality. Identity confirmed, the computer announced. Marcus Wong's research vessel, the Reality Bender. Sarah smiled grimly. Marcus Wong's experimental technology had always bordered on the impossible. During the Martian Wars, his weapons had given humanity a fighting chance against superior Borgen technology. Now, after years of unrestricted research, there was no telling what he'd developed. The Reality Bender docked with the Phantom, its unusual hull configuration making the process look like a glitch in reality itself. Marcus Wong stepped onto the bridge, looking nothing like the brilliant scientist Sarah remembered. Gone was the nervous academic. In his place stood a man hardened by years of isolated research and paranoia. Commander Chen, he greeted her, his voice carrying a synthetic undertone that suggested extensive cybernetic modifications. I brought gifts. He gestured, and a team of robots began unloading crates of weapons unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. Quantum-entangled projectiles, Marcus explained, holding up what looked like a standard rifle. They exist in multiple states simultaneously until impact. No shield technology in known space can stop them because they're technically not there until they hit. Sarah's cybernetic eye attempted to scan the weapons but returned only confusion errors. How did you manage this without Earth Command detecting your research? Marcus's laugh had a hollow, electronic quality. They did detect it. 3 times they sent teams to shut me down. 3 times they failed to return. Eventually, they decided it was safer to pretend I didn't exist. Before Sarah could respond, another alert sounded. Richard's personal shuttle was approaching. The bridge crew snapped to attention as the legendary Iron Wolf stepped onto his command ship for the first time in 8 years. Richard's eyes swept the bridge, noting the modifications, the new technology, the battle-hardened crew. Status report, he commanded, his voice carrying the same authority it had during the height of the wars. Sarah stepped forward. The Phantom is combat ready, sir. Marcus Wong has delivered advanced weapons systems, and I've assembled a crew of 147 specialists. Additionally, she hesitated, knowing the next piece of information would change everything. We've detected unusual patterns in recent Borgen attacks. They're preparing for a major offensive. Richard absorbed this information with the calculating focus that had made him legendary. Show me. As Sarah displayed the attack patterns, Marcus Wong interrupted. There's more, he said, his cybernetic voice grim. The attack on New Horizon wasn't random. I've analyzed the energy signatures from the weapon that killed your grandson. It was a prototype, something new they're testing. The colony was chosen specifically because of its isolation. They're developing weapons designed to overcome human shield technology. Richard's expression didn't change, but the temperature on the bridge seemed to drop. Explain. Marcus activated a holographic display, showing complex energy patterns. The weapon uses a form of quantum tunneling to bypass traditional defenses. They're preparing for a war of extinction, Richard. The peace treaty was just to buy time while they developed the technology to wipe us out completely. Sarah watched as Richard processed this information, recognizing the subtle signs of his strategic mind at work. Sir, she said carefully, if this is true, your personal vendetta might have uncovered something much bigger. It doesn't change anything, Richard replied, his voice steel. Our primary mission remains the same, making them pay for Jacob's death. But now we know we're working with a deadline. He turned to Marcus. How long before their weapon is ready for mass deployment? Based on the energy signatures. 3 months, maximum. Richard nodded once. Then we have 2 months to throw their entire empire into chaos. He moved to the tactical station, his fingers dancing across the controls with practiced ease. Sarah, set course for the outer rim. Marcus, I want your weapons distributed to the crew and training begun immediately. Sir, Sarah said, Earth Command will detect our movement the moment we leave the nebula. They'll try to stop us. A cold smile crossed Richard's face. No, they won't. Because we're going to give them something much more important to worry about. He turned to his communications officer. Send this data to every major news outlet in human space, proof of the Borgen's weapon development and their plans for genocide. Earth Command will be too busy dealing with public panic to stop us. As the crew rushed to comply with his orders, Richard stood at the tactical station, studying Borgen fleet movements. 8 years ago, I let them convince me that peace was worth any price, he said quietly. I stood down, went into exile, abandoned my own family in the name of political stability. Now I find out that decision almost doomed humanity. His hands clenched into fists. No more. The Iron Wolf doesn't just hunt for vengeance now, we hunt for survival. Sarah felt a familiar thrill run through her cybernetic systems. This was the Richard Ponting she remembered, the commander who could turn impossible situations into victories through a combination of brilliant strategy and sheer audacity. All stations, battle stations, she commanded. Prepare for immediate departure. As the Phantom's engines powered up, Sarah noticed Marcus studying one of his quantum weapons with an unsettling smile. You know, he said, his synthetic voice eerily calm, I always knew the peace wouldn't last. That's why I never stopped developing weapons. The Borgens think they've had 8 years to prepare for war. His laugh sent chills down Sarah's spine. I've had 8 years to prepare for their preparation. The Phantom slipped out of the nebula like a predator emerging from its den, its stealth systems active, its weapons primed, its crew ready. Somewhere in Borgen space, the architects of humanity's planned extinction continued their work, unaware that their attack on a small mining colony had set in motion events that would shake the foundations of their empire. The hunt had begun, and this time, the Iron Wolf wasn't just fighting for revenge, he was fighting for the survival of his species. The galaxy was about to learn why Richard Ponting's enemies had given him his nickname, and why the greatest military minds in known space still studied his campaigns with a mixture of awe and fear. The question was no longer whether there would be a war. The question was whether any force in the galaxy could survive what was coming. First Blood. The Borgen High Command Center on Zetax 7 was considered impregnable, a fortress of crystalline architecture and advanced defensive systems that had never been breached in its 1,000-year history. Until today. Richard Ponting stood in the Phantom's observation deck, watching as Marcus Wong's quantum-phased infiltrators moved through the Borgen defenses like ghosts through walls. The specially trained operatives wore experimental suits that kept them partially out of phase with normal spacetime, allowing them to bypass even the most sophisticated security measures. Team Alpha in position, Sarah Chen reported from her tactical station. Beta and Gamma approaching secondary targets. No alerts triggered. Richard nodded, his expression unchanged. This mission had been meticulously planned over the past week, every detail calculated to maximize both damage and psychological impact. The Borgans had killed his grandson to send a message. Now he would send one of his own. Incoming transmission, the communications officer announced. Earth Command, priority channel. Put it through, Richard ordered, surprising his crew. On the main screen, Admiral Helena Martinez appeared, her face a mask of controlled fury. "What the hell do you think you're doing, Wolf?" she demanded. "We've detected your ship near Borgen space. Stand down immediately." "Hello, Helena," Richard replied calmly. "I trust you've reviewed the data we released about the Borgen weapon program?" Martinez's expression flickered. "That's precisely why you need to stand down. We're conducting diplomatic negotiations." "No," Richard cut her off, "you're playing for time while they prepare to exterminate our species. But don't worry, Admiral. I'm not going to start a war." A cold smile crossed his face. "I'm going to prevent one." Before Martinez could respond, Richard signaled his communications officer to end the transmission. "All teams," he commanded, "execute." Across the Borgen Command Center, quantum-phased explosives detonated simultaneously. The crystalline structures, believed to be indestructible, shattered as reality itself seemed to fracture around them. But the destruction wasn't random. Richard had chosen his targets with surgical precision. "Research facilities destroyed," Sarah reported, her cybernetic eye processing the damage assessments. "Weapon development data corrupted. Their prototype production facilities are," she paused, frowning. "Sir, we're detecting unusual energy readings from sublevel 7. Richard moved to the tactical display, studying the readings. "Marcus?" The cybernetically enhanced scientist analyzed the data, his artificial eyes whirring. "That's not Borgen technology," he said quietly. "Those energy signatures, they're human." A chill ran through the bridge. "Confirm," Richard ordered. "Confirmed," Marcus replied. "Someone from Earth has been helping them develop their extinction weapon." Before Richard could respond, a new alert sounded. "Multiple Borgen warships entering the system," Sarah reported. "They're using attack patterns I've never seen before." The tactical display showed dozens of Borgen vessels emerging from hyperspace, their formations unlike anything in their known military doctrine. They moved with a precision that seemed almost human. "It's because they're being commanded by one," a new voice said. The bridge crew turned to see John Ponting, Richard's son, stepping out of a quantum portal that had appeared without warning. He looked haggard, his mining clothes replaced by combat gear. "John." Richard stepped toward his son, confusion warring with concern on his face. "How did you?" "There's no time," John cut him off. "I've spent the last week investigating why the Borgans chose New Horizon. It wasn't random, Dad. They killed Jacob because they found out what I discovered." The tactical display erupted with new alerts as the Borgen fleet began its attack. Their movements were devastatingly effective, countering the Phantom's advanced capabilities with uncanny accuracy. They're using our own tactics against us, Sarah realized. Classic wolf pack maneuvers, but how? Because they're being commanded by Admiral James Chen, John said, his voice heavy. Sarah's father. Sarah's cybernetic eye flickered as she processed this revelation. My father died in the Martian Wars, she whispered. No, John replied. He defected. He's been working with the Borgans for years, helping them understand human military strategy. Jacob saw him at New Horizon the day before the attack. That's why they had to silence us. Richard's tactical mind raced, reassessing everything in light of this new information. James Chen had been his closest friend, his most trusted advisor during the Martian Wars. If he was commanding the Borgan fleet. All hands, battle stations, Richard commanded. Sarah, execute maneuver pattern Delta 7. But sir, she protested, that's a suicide run. Your father helped develop that maneuver, Richard cut her off. He'll be expecting it. Which is why we're going to do something he'd never expect me to do. He turned to Marcus. Remember that experimental drive system you mentioned? The one that might tear the ship apart. Marcus's artificial eyes widened. You can't be serious. The Borgans aren't the only ones who've evolved their tactics, Richard said grimly. Sarah, plot a quantum tunnel directly through their command ship. Marcus, divert all power to the experimental drive. John, we need to talk about what else you found on New Horizon. As the crew rushed to execute his orders, Richard faced his son. I'm sorry, he said quietly. About Jacob. About everything. I didn't come here for apologies, Dad, John replied. I came because what's happening is bigger than our family. The Borgans aren't preparing for war, they're trying to prevent one. There's something out there in deep space, something that terrified them enough to make them want to eliminate all potential competition for resources. The Phantom shuddered as Borgan weapons fire impacted its shields. On the tactical display, James Chen's fleet executed a perfect encirclement maneuver, one that Richard himself had invented. Sir, Sarah called out, quantum tunnel calculations complete, but this is going to kill us all. Richard looked at his son, at Sarah, at Marcus, at the crew that had followed him into what seemed like certain death. No, he said firmly. It's going to save us all. He took command of the tactical station himself. Because your father forgot the most important lesson I ever taught him, the wolf hunts best when everyone thinks he's trapped. The Phantom's experimental drive engaged, reality twisted, and the ship phased between dimensions as Richard Ponting prepared to demonstrate why he had earned his reputation as the most unpredictable tactician in human history. The fate of humanity now rested on his ability to outthink the man who knew his strategies better than anyone else in the galaxy. The real war was about to begin, and its first battle would be fought between two old friends who had once sworn to die protecting each other. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the deadliest enemies are the ones who know you best. And somewhere in deep space, something ancient and terrible was watching, waiting to see if humanity and the Borgans would destroy each other before it had to intervene. The true test of Richard's legendary tactical genius wouldn't be winning this battle, it would be recognizing which war actually needed to be fought. The abyss gazes back. Reality reassembled itself around the Phantom like shattered glass reforming into a window. The quantum tunnel maneuver had worked, but the cost was written across every system on the ship. Warning alerts screamed from multiple stations as the crew struggled to reorient themselves. Damage report, Richard commanded, his voice steady despite the blood trickling from his nose, a side effect of quantum phase transition. Hull integrity at 47%, Sarah responded, her cybernetic eye flickering as it recalibrated. Weapons systems offline. Shields aren't reading at all. It's like they're there and not there simultaneously. Marcus Wong stumbled to his monitoring station, his artificial eyes spinning wildly. The experimental drive created quantum echoes throughout the ship's systems. We're existing in multiple states simultaneously. It's impossible to determine which version of us is the primary reality. On the main view screen, the impossible became visible. The Phantom hadn't just pierced through James Chen's command ship, it had shattered the fabric of spacetime around the entire Borgen fleet. Ships flickered in and out of existence, their forms splitting and recombining as reality struggled to resolve itself. "Sir," the sensor operator called out, his voice shaking. "I'm detecting something at the edge of sensor range. It's massive." Richard moved to the sensor station, John at his side. The readings made no sense, a structure larger than a solar system, but somehow folded into dimensions that shouldn't exist. As they watched, parts of it seemed to unfold into normal space, like a flower of impossible geometry blooming in the void. "That's what the Borgans found," John said quietly. "What they've been preparing for." They called it the Void Architect in their classified files. A new voice filled the bridge, broadcasting on all frequencies simultaneously. "Hello, old friend." James Chen's voice carried a weight of years and terrible knowledge. "I should have known you'd find a way to surprise me, even now." "Admiral Chen," Sarah whispered, her human eye filling with tears while her cybernetic one continued analyzing tactical data. "Hello, daughter," James replied. "Richard, there are things you need to know. Things I've seen. The quantum tunnel you just created, you've attracted their attention." As if in response to his words, the massive structure at the edge of sensor range began to move. Space itself seemed to bend around it, stars disappearing as it passed. Both the Phantom and the Borgen fleet seemed insignificant before its scale. "Full power to sensors," Richard ordered. "Marcus, I need answers." The scientist worked frantically at his station, his cybernetic enhancements processing data faster than human thought. It's not just a structure. It's alive. Or, what we'd consider alive. The quantum distortions from our drive matched its basic frequency. We rang a bell it could hear. The Borgans found it decades ago, James Chen continued, his voice heavy with resignation. An ancient race that exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously. They've been watching, waiting to see if any species in our galaxy would discover quantum manipulation technology. That's what marks a civilization as ready for harvest. The weapon, John realized. The Borgans weren't developing it to destroy humanity. They were trying to prevent us from reaching this technological threshold. "Yes," James confirmed. "I defected because I saw what was coming." The Borgans had already lost several outer colonies to these things. They call themselves the Quantum Architects, but that's just the closest translation we could manage. They don't build ships or weapons, they reshape reality itself. Richard's tactical mind raced, processing implications and possibilities. The attack on New Horizon. Jacob's death. None of it was supposed to happen, was it? "No," James said, his voice breaking. "That was a rogue faction within the Borgen military, ones who believed a more aggressive approach was needed. I never wanted." He paused. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. Everything I did to try to save humanity. Even if it meant being remembered as a traitor." The massive structure continued its approach, reality distorting more severely with each passing moment. Crew members began reporting headaches, nosebleeds, as human minds struggled to process what they were seeing. "Sir," Marcus called out urgently. "The quantum echoes from our drive, they're creating a cascade effect. Reality is becoming increasingly unstable in this sector. If we don't do something soon, the entire region will collapse into a quantum singularity." Richard looked at his son, remembering Jacob's smile, the weight of all that had led to this moment. "James," he said finally, "I need to know everything you know about these beings. No more secrets. No more hidden agendas. The time for that is past." "Accessing secured files now," James responded. "But Richard, what I'm about to show you, it will change everything you think you know about the universe." About life itself. As the classified data began streaming to the Phantom's computers, the massive structure seemed to pause its approach. Tentacles of impossible geometry reached out, testing the quantum distortions around the ships like a curious child poking at a new toy. Multiple dimensions detected, Marcus reported, his voice filled with wonder and horror. They're restructuring local space-time. Creating a bubble of altered reality around us. Sir. I think they're trying to communicate. Sarah's cybernetic eye suddenly began projecting new data, symbols and patterns that shouldn't have been possible. Dad, she called out. The Borgen research, you weren't just studying them, were you? You found a way to understand their language. Yes, James confirmed. But understanding came with a price. What they want, what they're offering, it's evolution, but on a scale we can barely comprehend. The Borgans refused. That's why they were so desperate to prevent other species from attracting their attention. The symbols floating in the air began to coalesce into patterns that hurt to look at, carrying meaning that scraped at the edges of human comprehension. Richard felt blood trickling from his ears as his mind struggled to process what he was seeing. They're offering us a choice, James translated, his voice distant. Ascension to their state of existence, or deletion from all possible realities. The same choice they've offered to countless civilizations before us. Richard Ponting, the legendary Iron Wolf, stood on his bridge and faced a decision that would determine not just the fate of humanity, but its very nature. The revenge he had sought for his grandson's death now seemed small against the cosmic scale of what they faced. But as he studied the patterns, his tactical mind began to see something else, a flaw in the being's seemingly perfect manipulation of reality. A weakness born of their very nature as creatures of multiple dimensions. Marcus, he said quietly, what would happen if we inverted the quantum drive's frequency? Created a resonance pattern that amplified the dimensional instability instead of trying to stabilize it. The scientist's artificial eyes widened as he ran the calculations. We'd create a feedback loop in their own dimensional manipulation. It would, sir, it would be like using their own nature as a weapon against them. But the energy requirements. The Borgen fleet, Sarah interrupted, understanding dawning in her human eye. If we synchronized our quantum signatures. Richard turned to the communications panel. James, one last time, old friend. Will you hunt with the wolf? There was a long pause before James Chen responded. For humanity. For Jacob. The wolf hunts one final time. As the cosmic entities reached out to remake humanity in their image, the Iron Wolf prepared to demonstrate why he had earned his reputation as the most dangerous tactician in known space. The greatest hunt of his life was about to begin, and the prey was nothing less than gods themselves. The universe held its breath as Richard Ponting prepared to wage war against beings that existed beyond the bounds of conventional reality. The question was no longer whether humanity would survive, but what it would become in the aftermath of what was about to unfold. The final hunt had begun, and its outcome would reshape the very nature of existence itself. When gods fall. The universe held paradoxes beyond human comprehension, but Richard Ponting had spent his life turning impossibilities into victories. As he stood on the bridge of the Phantom, watching reality fracture around them, he thought of Jacob's smile, of bedtime stories about Earth, of promises broken and renewed. Quantum synchronization with Borgen fleet complete, Marcus reported, his artificial eyes streaming data faster than human neurons could process. Sir, what we're attempting, it violates every known law of physics. The laws were written by beings who never imagined this moment, Richard replied, his tactical display showing both Borgen and human ships moving into precise formation. James, status of your fleet. Ready, his old friend responded, the quantum communications cutting through the dimensional distortions. The Borgans, they've agreed to follow your lead, Wolf. Even the faction that. He paused. They understand now. What's at stake? The quantum architect's vast structure continued its impossible unfolding, each movement sending ripples through spacetime that threatened to tear reality apart. Their attempt at communication had become more insistent, the symbols floating in the void growing more complex, more demanding. "They're getting impatient," Sarah observed, her cybernetic eye tracking the dimensional fluctuations. "They've never encountered resistance to their offer before." "Because no one ever saw them for what they truly are," Richard said quietly. "Not gods. Not demons. Just bullies with better weapons." He turned to Marcus. "Begin the sequence." The scientist's fingers danced across his console, initiating a process that would either save humanity or erase it from existence. The experimental quantum drive on the Phantom began to pulse, its frequency precisely calibrated to create a resonance with the Borgen fleet's combined energy signatures. "Dad," John said suddenly, studying a secondary display. "These readings, they match what we found in Jacob's DNA." Richard's head snapped up. "What?" "The quantum radiation from their first attempts to communicate," John explained. "It changed him. Changed all the children on New Horizon. They were evolving, becoming something new. That's why that Borgen faction attacked. They weren't trying to silence us, they were trying to prevent the change." Understanding dawned across James Chen's face. "Of course," he breathed. The children were developing natural quantum perception. The next step in human evolution. The architects weren't offering us transcendence, they were trying to prevent it. To keep us dependent on their technology. The massive structure suddenly pulsed, reality bending around it as the beings finally recognized the threat. Tentacles of impossible geometry reached out, trying to unmake the ships that dared to challenge them. "Now!" Richard commanded. The combined fleets activated their drives simultaneously, creating a quantum resonance that amplified the dimensional instabilities the architects themselves had created. The being's own manipulation of reality became a weapon against them, their multidimensional nature trapping them in a feedback loop of their own making. The void itself seemed to scream as spacetime twisted and buckled. Crew members across both fleets collapsed, blood streaming from their eyes as human minds struggled to process what they were witnessing. Only those with cybernetic enhancements remained fully conscious. "Reality collapse in 60 seconds, Marcus reported, his artificial systems barely able to maintain coherence. "Sir, the feedback is affecting us too. We're going to lose containment." Richard turned to his son. "John, the children, what exactly were they becoming?" "Something new," John replied, understanding blooming in his eyes. "Something that could exist in multiple states of reality simultaneously. Natural quantum beings." "Sarah," Richard commanded, "broadcast Jacob's genetic data to every colony in range. Every human settlement. Now." As Sarah complied, the quantum architect's structure began to break apart, its impossible geometry collapsing in on itself. But with it, the fabric of reality around the fleet started to unravel. 30 seconds to total collapse, Marcus announced. Richard looked at his crew, at Sarah, her cybernetic eye streaming tears of both blood and emotion, at Marcus, his artificial systems fighting to maintain cohesion, at John, who had lost everything but found purpose in this final moment. "James," he said softly, "thank you for showing me the bigger picture. The wolf's last hunt wasn't for revenge. It was for evolution itself." As reality began to tear itself apart, a new reading appeared on their sensors. Across human space, children were changing, their DNA responding to the quantum frequencies being broadcast. They were becoming something that could survive what was coming, natural quantum beings who could navigate the chaos about to be unleashed. "Impact in 10 seconds, Marcus reported. "Sir, it's been an honor." Richard Ponting, the Iron Wolf, smiled as spacetime collapsed around them. "No," he corrected. "It's been a revolution. The universe fractured. Reality twisted. And in the depths of chaos, humanity transformed. When the quantum dust settled, the architects were gone, their multidimensional empire collapsed into singularities across space. But humanity had changed. The children led the way, their evolved consciousness able to perceive and manipulate quantum states naturally. Adults followed more slowly, guided by the new generation. On New Horizon, now a thriving colony at the forefront of humanity's quantum evolution, a statue stands in the central square. It shows a young boy with unruly hair, smiling as he plays with a metallic ball. The plaque reads, "In memory of Jacob Ponting, whose death sparked a revolution, and Richard Iron Wolf Ponting, whose final hunt freed humanity to evolve into what it was always meant to become." The children now walk between dimensions, and the stars themselves bow to their passage. And somewhere in the quantum foam between realities, in a state of existence beyond traditional life or death, the Iron Wolf still hunts, protecting his pack as they grow into their new existence. For he had learned the greatest lesson of all: sometimes revenge isn't about destroying your enemies, but about becoming something they never imagined you could be. The story of the Iron Wolf became legend, told in quantum frequencies across dimensional barriers. Not just a tale of revenge, but of transformation. Of how humanity faced gods and instead of bowing down, chose to become something new entirely. And in every telling, they remember the boy whose death started it all, and the grandfather whose love for him changed the very nature of human existence. For in the end, the greatest victory wasn't destroying the gods. It was becoming something beyond them.